Everyone knows about the American tanks rolling into Iraq and Kuwait, but do you know about the French 6th Light Armored Division attacking on the far left flank, or the British 1st Armored Division destroying Iraqi positions alongside American forces, or the Saudi and Kuwaiti units liberating their own territory? What about the Bangladeshi field hospital treating wounded, the Czechoslovakian chemical warfare unit, the Nigerian medical team? Desert Storm wasn't just an American war, it was 34 nations fighting together. This is their story. Welcome back to Gulf War Chronicles. Today we're talking about the coalition forces that fought alongside the United States in Desert Storm. When people remember the war, they remember American forces, and we had the most troops, the most equipment, the most firepower. But this was genuinely a multinational effort. Arab countries, European allies, even nations from Asia and Africa contributed forces. Some sent combat units. Others sent medical teams, ships, transport aircraft, financial support. Together, they created the largest military coalition since World War II. Let's talk about who actually fought this war. The numbers tell the story. The coalition had 956,000 troops total. The United States contributed 540,000, more than half, but that means over 400,000 troops came from other nations. Saudi Arabia sent 100,000 troops, the United Kingdom sent 53,000, France sent 18,000, Egypt sent 40,000, Syria sent 20,000. These weren't token forces. These were real military units that fought and bled alongside American forces. The Arab coalition members were politically critical. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Egypt, Syria, Morocco, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, all contributed forces. This wasn't Western powers attacking an Arab country. This was an international coalition including major Arab states fighting to expel Iraq from Kuwait. That narrative mattered enormously for legitimacy and for maintaining support from Arab populations. Saudi Arabia did the heavy lifting among Arab forces. They provided the bases, the infrastructure, the logistics support. Saudi troops fought at the Battle of Khafji, taking back the border town from Iraqi occupation. Saudi pilots flew combat missions. Saudi National Guard units secured rear areas. And Saudi Arabia paid billions to support the war effort, both their own forces and contributions to other coalition members' costs. The British contribution was substantial. The British 1st Armored Division, the famous Desert Rats, fought alongside the American 7th Corps during the Ground War. They had Challenger tanks, Warrior infantry fighting vehicles, artillery. At the Battle of Norfolk, British forces engaged Republican Guard units. They fought in some of the heaviest armored combat of the war. British Special Air Service, SAS, conducted reconnaissance and direct action missions deep in Iraq, including the famous but ill-fated Bravo 20 patrol. The French sent the 6th Light Armored Division, Division Daguet. They attacked on the far left of the coalition advance, securing the western flank and protecting against any Iraqi counterattack from that direction. French forces included the Foreign Legion, which had soldiers from over 40 countries serving in French uniform. The Foreign Legion's combat effectiveness was legendary, and they proved it in Desert Storm. French Jaguar fighter bombers flew combat missions. French Special Forces operated behind Iraqi lines. Egypt and Syria contributed significant Arab forces. Egyptian armored divisions participated in the liberation of Kuwait, fighting alongside coalition forces in the ground offensive. Syrian troops provided security and participated in operations. The fact that Syria, typically aligned with the Soviet Union and often hostile to Western interests, joined the coalition showed how isolated Iraq had become. Iraq's invasion of Kuwait had united unlikely allies against Saddam. Smaller nations made contributions that mattered. Canada sent CF-18 fighter jets, ships, and field hospitals. Australia sent ships and a medical team. New Zealand sent transport aircraft and medical personnel. Italy, Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands, All sent ships to enforce the naval blockade of Iraq. Argentina sent ships. Even nations with no obvious strategic interest in the Persian Gulf contributed because they supported the principle of reversing aggression. Some contributions were unusual. Czechoslovakia, this was 1991 before it split into Czech Republic and Slovakia, sent a chemical warfare decontamination unit. Everyone feared Saddam might use chemical weapons, so having specialized units to deal with that threat was valuable. Niger sent troops. Senegal sent troops. Bangladesh sent medical personnel. These weren't major military powers, but they showed up. The naval coalition was massive. Ships from 14 countries enforced the blockade and maritime interception operations. American, British, French, Italian, Spanish, Belgian, Dutch, Australian, Canadian, Argentine, and other navies worked together to intercept ships attempting to trade with Iraq in violation of UN sanctions. They boarded thousands of vessels, inspected cargo, turned back ships carrying prohibited goods. It was tedious, dangerous work, boarding unknown vessels in international waters, but critical to the economic pressure on Iraq. Coalition air forces flew together in one of the most complex air campaigns in history. American aircraft were the majority, but British Tornadoes, French Jaguars, Saudi F-15s, Kuwaiti A-4 Skyhawks, Canadian CF-18s, Italian Tornadoes, all participated in the air war. Coordinating aircraft from multiple countries, with different languages and procedures, flying in the same crowded airspace, was a massive challenge. The fact that it worked with minimal incidents was remarkable. The integration wasn't perfect. There were communication problems, different radios, different procedures, different languages. There were cultural differences in how different militaries operated. Some nations had restrictions on where their forces could be deployed or what missions they could conduct. France, for example, wanted operational independence and insisted on commanding their own sector. The British integrated closely with American forces but maintained their own command structure. Arab forces operated under different rules of engagement than Western forces. Casualties among coalition forces reflected the multinational nature of the effort. The United States lost 147 killed in action. Saudi Arabia lost 18. The United Kingdom lost 47. Egypt lost 14. France lost 2. The United Arab Emirates lost 6. Senegal lost 1 soldier. These losses, while small compared to Iraqi casualties, represented real sacrifice from nations that had chosen to stand against aggression. The financial coalition was just as important as the military one. The United States spent $61 billion on Desert Storm, but coalition partners contributed $54 billion to offset those costs. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait paid the most, but Germany and Japan, which didn't send combat forces, made substantial financial contributions. The war was largely paid for by the international community, not just American taxpayers. There's a famous image from after the liberation of Kuwait, flags from all 34 coalition nations flying together in Kuwait City. American flag, Saudi flag, British flag, French flag, Egyptian flag, Syrian flag, all side by side. That image captured what made Desert Storm different from other modern wars. This wasn't a unilateral American action. This was the international community, led by the United States but including nations from every continent, acting together to reverse aggression. The coalition building was President Bush and Secretary of State James Baker's diplomatic masterpiece. They spent months assembling the coalition, negotiating contributions, maintaining unity, getting Syria and Egypt on the same side, getting NATO allies to contribute despite internal political opposition, getting Arab states comfortable fighting alongside Israel's main ally, getting the Soviet Union, still existing in 1991, to not veto UN resolutions. All of that required skilled diplomacy. The coalition model influenced future conflicts. When the U.S. invaded Afghanistan in 2001, it built a coalition. When it invaded Iraq in 2003, it tried to build a coalition, though smaller and more controversial than Desert Storms. The idea that major military operations should have international legitimacy and multinational participation became standard. Desert Storm set that precedent. For the soldiers, sailors, and airmen from coalition nations, serving in Desert Storm was often a defining experience. French foreign legionnaires who'd never worked with Americans learned combined operations. Saudi officers who'd trained in Western military schools put that training into practice. British tankers who'd prepared for fighting Soviets in Europe instead fought Iraqis in the desert. Egyptian soldiers fought to liberate an Arab country from another Arab country's occupation. All of those experiences shaped their militaries and their countries. The coalition also had failures and limitations. Some nations contributed only token forces for political purposes. Some forces were poorly equipped or trained compared to American standards. Some Arab units had low morale or deserted. The integration wasn't seamless. Different military cultures sometimes clashed. But overall, the coalition held together, fought together, and won together. That was the important thing. If you served with coalition forces from other nations, or if you were a coalition service member from another country, I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. The American-centric view of Desert Storm overlooks the contributions of dozens of other nations. This was genuinely a team effort, and every nation that contributed deserves recognition. Thanks for watching Gulf War Chronicles. Desert Storm's coalition wasn't just a diplomatic nicety, it was a fighting force of nearly 1 million troops from 34 nations. They came from different continents, spoke different languages, practiced different religions, but they fought for the same goal: reversing aggression and liberating Kuwait. That matters. The coalition model has been tried many times since, with varying success, but Desert Storm showed it could work when the cause was just and the leadership was committed. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button. We're telling the complete story of Desert Storm, including the international effort that made it possible. I'll see you in the next one.